At 0300 hours in the western approaches where the British continental shelf fades into the lightless Atlantic deep, HMS Iron Duke was pushing hard through the darkness, trying to stay on the trail of its target. Then, without warning, an overwhelming sonic pulse, around 240 decibels, crashed into the ship's steel hull like a massive unseen hammer rising from the depths. In an instant, the ship's advanced surveillance system went dark. 200 meters below, the Russian commander was likely satisfied, convinced that his Kilo-class submarine, Krasnodar, had just delivered a sharp message to the Royal Navy in waters close to home. But that move came with a serious miscalculation. The sonar burst was not enough to drive anyone back. It was more like striking a giant gong in the wilderness, drawing in something far more dangerous than expected. And this time, that something was a carefully coordinated response involving the US Navy, one Moscow had not anticipated. The moment the systems aboard Iron Duke recovered, the British captain understood exactly what was happening. Staying quiet now would mean surrendering the initiative. He gave the order immediately. Activate the Type 2 087 active sonar at full power. The first pulses slammed into the seabed below, creating intense acoustic pressure meant to force the Russian submarine out of hiding. But Krasnodar did not rise. Instead, it plunged toward the edge of the continental shelf, where the ocean floor drops away like the face of a submerged cliff. When British sonar struck those jagged underwater walls, the echoes scattered wildly. On the combat displays, one contact turned into 10 and 10 into 50. Krasnodar had used the landscape perfectly, disappearing into a chaotic maze of sound. And that raises the real question. Why does Britain track Russian submarines so closely? And why would Russia risk provoking British forces in the first place? Are they not worried about pushing things too far? The answer lies beneath the waterline. Hidden under the western approaches are the fiber optic cables that connect Europe and North America. Lines no thicker than a wrist, yet responsible for carrying vast amounts of financial traffic, military communications, and internet data. These waters are international, so Russian submarines can legally pass through. Officially, they are simply transiting. But their movements tell a different story. Unusually slow, unusually precise, and often concentrated around the most sensitive zones. British intelligence believes these missions may involve underwater drones, mapping cable routes, building options for future disruption if tensions ever rise further. That is why the mission was clear: track Russian vessels and shield critical infrastructure at any cost. When Russia unleashed that massive sonar pulse, the message became unmistakable. It was not random. It was a deliberate display of pressure, calculated to intimidate without crossing the line into open conflict. The signal was simple. We are here. We can reach you. And if you keep following us, the danger is yours to manage. The British captain was furious, but the terrain was working in the submarine's favor. Still, he refused to let it slip away. He ordered a course adjustment, reduced speed, and deployed a mile-long towed array sonar into deeper water, hoping to isolate the unique acoustic signature of the Russian propellers from the surrounding chaos. Even the faintest transient sound could have revealed the contact. But inside that underwater canyon, everything blended together. Current striking rock, geological noise, and lingering sonar reflections merged into a dense wall of interference. The British sonar team knew Krasnodar was still there, somewhere almost directly below them, but they could not produce enough clear data to lock the situation down. They had done everything possible, yet the seabed itself had become a shield. At that point, the operation had to move to the next level. The raw and fragmented data was pushed onto the Link 16 network. If the surface ship could not cut through the acoustic maze, then support from above had to enter the picture. And somewhere offshore, jet engines were already building power. From 30,000 feet, moving at 450 knots, a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon cut through the cloud layer with no time to waste. Its bay doors opened, releasing a spread of active sonobuoys that hit the water in quick succession, forming a tight ring around the mouth of the ravine where the Russian submarine was believed to be hiding. The speed of the American response was no coincidence. Even though these are not U.S. home waters, NATO views the western approaches as one of the Atlantic's most critical gateways. Because of that, patrol flights from forward bases in northern Europe maintained constant watch over the region. This P-8A had not just arrived by chance. It had already been circling nearby for hours, acting as a high-altitude guardian over the undersea cable routes. The moment the British ship transmitted its alert, the aircraft shifted instantly from observation to action. Unlike Iron Duke, whose view was distorted by underwater cliffs, the aircraft had the advantage of altitude and a broader tactical picture. Using the British towed sonar data as a guide, the Poseidon's sonobuoys built a closed tracking net around the submarine's hiding place. From that moment, the wall of sound Russia had relied on began to collapse. Every movement started leaving traces across the screens of the American tactical coordinator. Slowly but unmistakably, the position of Krasnodar began to emerge from the noise. As the net tightened, the Russian captain made one last move to seize back control. He knew his location had likely been compromised. Instead of making a desperate run, he turned to electronic warfare, targeting the enemy's sensors. The effect was immediate. The P-8A's display, which had begun to hold the submarine's track, suddenly erupted into confusion. One red contact became 2, then 4, then 12 false returns darting unpredictably across the screen. The aircraft's mission system flashed multiple target warnings. This was not simple interference. It was something more refined. The system captured the exact ping emitted by the American sonobuoys, altered the frequency, and sent it back with carefully timed delays. The result was a cloud of ghost contacts surrounding the real submarine, turning the tactical display into a puzzle of false trails. The situation froze again. The Americans knew the target remained inside the containment zone, but the clutter made it impossible to confirm a clean weapons-grade track. To break through that digital smokescreen, the US needed something no algorithm could imitate: direct physical presence. A decision was made aboard the P-8A. The order came through: execute Ghost Rider drop. The aircraft banked and released 2 metal tubes. They were not live munitions. They were advanced acoustic decoys. The instant they entered the water, they created a terrifying illusion below. At 400 meters, the Russian sonar operator suddenly heard a sound that no submariner ever wants to hear: the piercing whine of propellers running at full speed, combined with the rapid pulse of an active seeker. It sounded exactly like a Mark 54 torpedo in final approach. Panic spread through the compartment. A contact was closing fast. The Russian captain hesitated. Was this real, or was it a bluff designed to force a mistake? He stared at the displays, trying to separate reality from deception. Then came something even worse. From directly behind the submarine's stern, from a blind angle, a sharp physical shockwave slammed into Krasnodar's hull, strong enough to rattle the structure itself. It was a single, clean, deafening ping from a medium-frequency active sonar source. And when the return was processed, the answer was chilling. The source was less than 500 meters away. In the silent darkness of the deep, a 115-meter metal hunter, the nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine USS New Mexico, had slipped into position beside the Russian vessel without a sound. It had been waiting there, completely quiet, holding its place until the aircraft above had drawn the Russian crew's attention forward. Only then did it reveal itself, and that is what makes this moment so striking. This was multi-domain coordination at its highest level. The P-8A used acoustic deception to pull the Russian crew's focus ahead. USS New Mexico closed from another direction and delivered the final signal from point-blank range. That single sonar ping carried a message more powerful than any speech ever could. In submarine operations, if an opponent can place an active ping on your hull from 500 meters away, it means they could have ended the encounter long before you ever realized they were there. The fact that they chose not to go further and instead simply let the other side know how exposed they were was the sharpest possible statement. For the Russian crew, the situation changed in an instant. What had seemed like confidence and control dissolved into pure confusion. In their headphones, they heard what sounded like torpedoes racing in from ahead. Behind them, they sensed the presence of an American attack submarine close enough to make every second feel critical. Their instruments were saturated. Electronic decoys, false returns, and the unmistakable mass of a real nuclear-powered submarine blended into one overwhelming picture. To them, it felt as if a whole invisible fleet had closed in from every direction. Inside Krasnodar, tension took over. The air was heavy, the crew strained, and the captain, who only moments earlier had believed he held the upper hand, was suddenly trapped between 2 threats. On one side, the apparent approach of incoming weapons. On the other, a silent undersea predator sitting dangerously close. Warning lights flashed across the consoles. There was no time left to separate truth from deception. In that moment, instinct beat pride. The captain understood that even a collision in deep water could be catastrophic. He gave the order no submarine commander wants to make. Emergency blow, surface immediately. Compressed air thundered into the ballast tanks. The 3,000-ton submarine shuddered, then surged upward with violent force. The black surface of the night sea split open as Krasnodar burst through in a tower of white foam, rolling heavily before settling. But even on the surface, the pressure did not end. The moment the hatch opened, the Russian crew realized exactly how exposed they were. Searchlights from HMS Iron Duke locked onto the submarine at once, turning the sail into a bright target in the darkness. Above, the engines of the P-8A Poseidon roared as the aircraft banked overhead. The picture was impossible to ignore. A submarine built for stealth, now sitting in full view under NATO eyes, unable to hide. In naval terms, being forced to the surface without a shot being fired is a profound embarrassment. It means the contest was decided long before the final move. The encounter in the western approaches ended without open combat, yet the message delivered back to Moscow was unmistakable. International law may provide room for pressure tactics and ambiguity, but beneath the waves, every move is being watched. Krasnodar shut down its combat posture and turned north, remaining on the surface under British escort. The cables remained secure, and for the sailors aboard that submarine, the sound they were least likely to forget was not the chaos in front of them, but that cold, precise ping from somewhere in the darkness behind. Now for an important reality check for viewers. While HMS Iron Duke really did track Krasnodar, the specific U.S. Counter-move described here is a dramatized tactical scenario. It is built from open-source information to show how these systems could interact during a serious undersea confrontation. The goal is not just to repeat headlines, but to help the audience understand how modern naval warfare works when pressure rises and seconds matter. What matters most is that the larger risk is real. Russia may pull back today, but the challenge is not going away. One day it may be sonar pressure, another day it could be damage to undersea infrastructure presented as an accident at sea. And that leads to the real strategic question: if a fiber optic cable is severed tomorrow and the explanation is mechanical failure or dragged anchor, how should NATO respond? As a civilian incident or as deliberate hostile action? Where should that line be drawn? Share your view in the comments. And if you found this breakdown useful, support the channel with a like and subscribe to Navy Vector. Until the next briefing, dismissed.